Hi guys, welcome. My name is Walter Martina, and I am an academic coach and mentor, and I've been in academia for the past 16 years. I've been teaching in both private and public universities, nationally and internationally. And I just wanted to have this little chat in order for me to unpack my own thoughts around where I think we are at educationally. And well, I'm literally going to be using this platform as a way of unpacking my thoughts, as a way of making sense of some of the things that we are seeing going on around us. And I hope that you will be taking this journey with me so that we can explore together, think together, and actually just see where all of this takes us. So, some of you might want to know, fewer might not, but in any case, I am a social and cultural anthropologist by training, and some of the things that I've been interested in eons ago have absolutely nothing to do with education. But ever since, I would say, going on 8 years now, I've been particularly interested in education, how we learn. And as a direct result of that, I've been teaching psychology also for the past 8 years. And one of the things that both my anthropology and my psychology, as well as a myriad of other disciplines that I am interested in, invested in, I've come to a particular conclusion that I feel is indicative of an indictment of the education system. And I genuinely believe that what we need to do, not only as a people, but as a country, is to completely reform and undo the systems that exist. However, I'm not a politician, neither am I a policymaker. I take myself more as a pragmatist, one that realizes that in light of the challenges that we are facing as a country, especially in terms of education policy, it's not going to be anytime soon that we win that fight, and therefore divide and conquer. That's what I say. So there are those who are in some of these spaces, in politics, in the policy of it all. I support them 100%. We do need reform. But as you know, the reform is only going to take as long as it's going to take. But in the meantime, people still need to pass. People still need to be educated. People need to learn, and people need to write their exams and move on with their lives. And until such time where education literally then catches up to the policy changes that we would want, I think it is incumbent upon individuals like myself, who would then, figure out ways of assisting individuals, assisting people in the here and now. So let me explain a little bit more about what it means for me to be an academic coach and mentor. So, for starters, I am not a tutor. I am not going to focus on specific subjects as I give you cheap tricks in order for you guys to pass. In fact, let me actually say this, and it is totally bonkers. My desire is not for you to pass. I mean, yes, I would want you to pass, but if that were my primary goal, then I would be doing this wrong. There are people out there who are going to sell you all of the things that are going to give you an easy A, things that are going to make you be the best that you can be, or at least so they say. But the way that that happens, especially when you look at how crowded the education space actually is, especially the sort of commerce around it, how we've commercialized education. Everybody is going to give you tricks on how to study better, which isn't a bad thing, but your study is geared towards the output of exams. And for me, that is where I believe the challenge lies. The challenge lies when we shift away from the primary role of how education ought to change the lives of the people that engage it. And the moment our primary output is passing an exam, we are completely missing the point. So, why do I see it this way? So, for me, it's pretty simple. The issue is, and we see this when we take a look at how education has been evolving for the past 100 years or so. I know and I completely understand the entire politics and the litany of literature that suggests how education was actually designed to create workers. And I'm not going to go into that debate, neither am I saying that debate is wrong, but I'd like to add my own little 2 cents to it. If you take a look at what was happening, very few people were getting to their masters, their honors, or even their undergrad degrees, let alone PhDs. And yet, with just that kind of education, you were able to go out into the world of work and actually make something of yourself. Now, I know academic inflation is one of the challenges that we are grappling with. However, therein lies the heart, the crux of what I'm trying to put across. The reason why you were able to make it work out there in the world of work with just your high school diploma is precisely because what you were taught in high school was necessary for you to actually make it. Now, I'm not going to reveal my age by saying I was part of the very last. I was definitely not part of the last generation, but I did agriculture and I did carpentry, woodwork, when I was in high school. These were part and parcel of the course curriculum, and we actually set exams for that. And the reason why this was done is that there was an understanding that even when you finish your high school diploma, when you finish your matric, when you finish your A level, or even your O level, you automatically had a skill from which you could survive. And so there were people that were doing metal work. There were people that were doing agriculture. There were people that were doing, I don't know what it's called now, back in my day, fashion and design or needlework, where you were actually taught to sew. And I know and have individuals who I was in school with at the time who actually couldn't get money to proceed with their education, and they used what they had studied in high school to actually make a living. Now, what does all of this have to do with being an academic coach and where we're at right now as we talk about the state of education and so on and so forth. Yes, with where we're at, time has moved. Most students won't be doing these practical subjects. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that you lose the essence of education, precisely because what education was designed to do was to meet you where you are at, was to open you up to critical thinking and to a wider world that enabled you to live beyond the limitations of your geographic space. We often hear about how people say, I didn't know what my options were until I traveled. So I went to a different context and I witnessed things that, are missing where I came from. And that is exactly what education is supposed to do. It's supposed to transform you. It's supposed to transport you beyond geographic boundaries. It is supposed to introduce you to a world that is bigger than your own little space. But I don't believe it does that. And some of the things that I wish to happen is that education needs to start preparing us even for a world that we aren't quite sure of. In many of the spaces that I operate and some of the things that I personally do, I run a series of workshops with church elders, and I take them through what it means to be a church in the 21st century. So specifically in South Africa and today in 2026, what exactly does it mean? We obviously know that change is upon us and a lot of things are taking place, and we know that the environment is no longer conducive for church. Churches are being vilified left, right, and center, and that's not to even go into the whole politics of the opportunism that is found within few individuals that tend to use church as a scam, if you will. But what I say to these pastors and these elders is that you need to be prepared for a world you know nothing about. And that's easy to say, but when it comes to the practice of doing it, the real challenge comes in unlearning what you were taught, because the world for which you were trained is no longer the world in which you are going to implement your training. So imagine yourself, you are in university or you're in matric right now, at whatever level. Whatever it is that you are being taught is only worth its weight in salt for the world you're in right now. But the moment you complete that degree, the moment you complete that level of education and you move on to the next one, everything that you were taught no longer applies. So what you now need is a way of unlearning what you learned without discarding it completely, but actually leveraging it in ways that enable you to make the most of an unknown future. Because let's face it, nobody has ever been to the future. I mean, for all talks of time travel, we have no clue. And so all of the things that we are doing now, all of the preparations are for a time and space that we've never been in. We have no idea what's actually going to take place. And for all intents and purposes, all of our training is totally going to be thrown out the window. However, you have paid an arm and a leg. And so because of that, you still need to get something out of it. That's my philosophy. My philosophy is, even if you are doing a psychology degree, I mean, God forbid, I have students who failed to finish their courses not because they were not smart enough, but precisely because they didn't have the funds to proceed. And yet they were able, with their 1 year or their 2 years of training, to actually build something of themselves and for themselves in order for them to live. And how did they do it? They looked at education a little differently. They looked at education not so much as a delivery of content, but more as a system of thinking that ought to inform the way we engage with the world. And to do that is to come to the realization that what education is teaching us is a way of analyzing and understanding our world. And so you could be doing economics, you're doing the exact same thing. You could be a botanist, a zoologist, you could be an anthropologist, you could be a social scientist, you could be a mathematician. The only thing that we are all doing in our own way is looking at the world a little differently and trying to understand it. And if that is how we begin to approach education, you'll then immediately realize that you didn't waste time studying what you studied. What you do need to do is to figure out how exactly were you taught. What exactly were you taught? What are the implications? So, more than anything, what I am driving at is a level of reflexivity that enables you to look back, stand outside of yourself, have yourself an outer body experience. Look back at yourself. Look at what you were taught. Look at how you are being taught. What exactly can you actually get from that? Because my philosophy is the person that's in front of the class teaching you isn't just teaching you content. They are teaching you how they are teaching you. And they are doing it by actually teaching you. So there's a wealth of information that we can potentially use to go out there and be the best that we can be. I know a lot of people that are now going into training, and you don't even need a degree for that. But what they did was looked at the teachers and the professors that had the most impact on them, and they looked at how those people taught. They looked at the way those educators articulated themselves. They looked at how they broke down information. Now, this could have been in a medical degree and you didn't finish, but for as long as you were able to reflect on that and to see that, you can literally start your own business, your own company, doing anything that you want. But the most important thing for me is we need to stop looking at school as a delivery of content exclusively. We need to actually expand on what we mean by content. Soft skills are being taught without being explicitly taught. And this is a big thing for me because there's a lot of that actually going around. And because we tend to miss it, especially in university, because university requires you to do and to see a lot of the things that you are not formally taught. And yet those are the things that you need in order for you to thrive in, at times even more so than the content that you have. Because one thing that you immediately begin to realize is that the facts, while they're important, don't make the story. The story makes the facts. What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is, for most of university, what we are trying to figure out from you is, are you able to see the world from a completely different vantage point? So when you get those readings, when you get those handouts, and you have to do a book report, you are using the same facts in the entire class, same as, I don't know, depending on what level you're on, 600 other students in that class, and you're all expected to write something. Now, in such a situation, you immediately begin to see that, yes, I mean, facts are important, but in this case, we are all using the same facts, but we are arriving at completely different conclusions. Because what we are now looking for isn't so much your ability to regurgitate information, but you need to have a prehensile mind with the ability to abstract, with the ability to grasp information, to twist it, to look at it from unique angles. And so the stories that you are able to tell from the data that you have, that becomes more important than the data itself. And the moment you begin to look at education from that perspective, now you are able to have an advantage over the next person without that. Because what exactly is the other person going to be doing? The other person is simply going to be looking at how exactly does this book talk about this? How exactly am I meant to understand this? But your attempt at locating an authentic answer that stems from what you assume the lecturer is looking for is totally going to make you fail, because you need the kind of authenticity that revolves around your own creativity. And so what I am pushing towards is a view of education that liberates you, that goes beyond just the mere content. So there is an entire world that is laid down in the foundation of education, regardless of what level you're on. And the entire education system assumes you possess this material, you possess this knowledge. And so by the time they give you content, the assumption is you already know how we are going to treat that content and what we are going to do. But not all of us are aware of what that is. And because of that, a lot of people fail or get it way later than they should have, not because they're not smart enough, but precisely because we are not the same individual. And don't get me wrong, the education system, to the extent that it is aware of this, actually thrives on it. Precisely because if you look at the throughput of education and who actually makes it out in the end, it is one long bottleneck that keeps getting tapered the more it goes out. For example, when you are in first year, I taught number of courses at Wits University. First year, way back in the day, I was a teaching assistant and I was a tutor, and we had well over 600 students in first year, but moved to second year, we now have about 300. Move over to third year, and now we are dealing with anywhere between 90 and 120 students. And by the time you get to your honors, we now have about 24, and that's when we're saying it's a good year. But it's primarily in the teens. And for your masters, if there is 12 of you, it's a good year, and you'd only have about 1 or 2 PhD students. And so we tend to see how that pipe tends to taper, allowing and constricting fewer and fewer individuals to make it. And yes, some people meet their match, it's not for them, good. But some people are excluded primarily because they're unaware of the rules of engagement. They're unaware of the things that are expected of them. And because all of these things are never taught, it actually then works for the system, precisely because only those that get the system are reproduced by the system as replacements for the system. So it is not a mistake that you're unaware of some of the things that you are called upon to know. It is actually by design. But what I intend to do is to break that mold. Now, how do I break that mold? I start breaking that mold in high school. Because one of the challenges that we would face in university, especially with first years, is how do we elevate these students in order for them to be receptive of what we have to teach at first year university level. And even though I'm not too sure where these conversations went, but a couple of years ago, both Vista University and UCT actually decided to have law as a postgrad degree. So your regular old LLB, which you use to enter into straight out of high school, they decided, you know what? The amount of work that is required in order for you to make it here, we can't actually do it. What we need is to teach you the content, the principles, the methods, and some of the mechanisms that are needed in order for you to make it. You already need to possess. But we kept on seeing that we were receiving students from high school who didn't have any of these skills. And so the onus was now on us to actually capacitate our first year students while we are teaching them this. And the challenge then became, it's too much work. It is quite impossible to put together all of the things that these students actually need to bring them up to snuff. And so Wits University, UCT at the time were like, you know what? When it comes to law, it has to be a postgrad degree. So we're not saying that you are now starting your law degree at honors level. Nope. You're going to do your own BA degree or whatever other degree that you do first year until third year. And once you're done, you can apply for law and then you start law first year. And the rationale was, by the time you get to third year in whatever degree you're in, they would have taught you critical thinking skills and you would have assimilated into the culture of university that forces you to think in particular ways, to write in particular ways, to exist in particular ways, even have particular thought patterns. And all of these are things that are not explicitly taught, but these are things that you're meant to grasp. And a lot of students fail to do that. But now, if you go through all of that and you want to proceed, chances are you've learned it. You might not know that you know it, but now you know it. And so that is how education is, but I wanted to shift from that to a point where we understand what exactly it is that is being expected of us. So my own intervention is to speak to you about all of the things that you are meant to know, but that you are never taught. But why am I doing it? I'm doing it precisely because I was you. I was one of those individuals that didn't quite know. I had, wouldn't call it luck, but I had the gift of understanding what I was being taught. I knew the content and I would deliver exactly what was expected of me. But it wasn't until I started my postgrad that I began to actually see that learning is more than just the content, because now I had to start thinking about how I want my content to be perceived. How do I want my arguments to be understood? What exactly is the kind of emotion that I'm trying to invoke? What am I trying to get people to do? And the moment you start to think in those terms, you begin to see something emerge. That is, education isn't passive. But without it being passive, these are the things that you needed to have learned that nobody taught you. The system just assumed you would learn on your own and you would get. So I figured there are those like me who might not get it at all. There are others as well who might get it later on in life, and there's definitely a sizable number who get it straight away. But I don't feel like it is a good thing to have those that would have gotten it later to get punished, precisely because we need to understand that we are all individuals who are completely different. And some of the people that ended up doing exceptionally well later on in life had a slow start because maybe nobody really believed they could, or they weren't up to the creative standard and imaginative standard that the world was looking at. But the moment they got the coaching, they became so hot, they literally made the sun blush. And so there are thousands and thousands of people out there who I feel need this kind of assistance, where in order for them to be the best versions of themselves, in order for them to grow into the person that the world requires them to be, they actually need somebody to hold their hands and take them through, show them the ropes. I mean, let's face it, we all need a helping hand every once in a while. And it's quite rare for us to actually receive it. However, I get it. I'm not saying I am the one that breaks the mold. But all I'm saying is there is something fundamentally wrong with our education system. And the only great starting point at which we can break this is in high school. So I am going to be continue talking about my views on education and all of the things that I feel ought to be done, need to be done, until such time we are able to level the playing field. Because boy, oh boy, there are a lot of people with a lot to offer that get let down by the system that is designed to weed them out, and yet they need a little more time, a little more coaching, a little more mentorship to help them through, to actually see the light. And the moment they are aimed in the right direction, Bob's your uncle. And so it is for those guys that my heart goes out to. And I'm telling you now, you're not alone, and we are going to do it. But thank you for listening to my little rant, and hope to see you in the next one. Bye, guys.